My name isn't Leroy. I was 9 years old, riding my bike with several kids who lived in my neighborhood. We were riding our bikes to the baseball field to play catch. The baseball field was not far from our houses, as we lived on Brooklyn Air Force Base in Mobile, Alabama. It was early evening, but the lights were already on at the baseball field. What I remember next is something that puzzled me then, but as I would find out later, was just a hint of things to come. The lights suddenly went out on the baseball complex, as they often do, because they're on a timer, but all you have to do is flip the switch to turn them back on. I remember my friends riding away from me, and suddenly I felt we were playing a game of hide and seek. It wasn't that dark yet, and I could see them as they were pretending that they were looking for someone in the dark, loudly yelling, "Leroy, where are you?" Now I was puzzled, because there were only 4 of us that rode our bikes together to the baseball park, me and my 3 white friends. And I know even though it was a little dark by now, as the lights were slowly coming back on, because someone had flipped the switch, they could see me, but they continued to laugh and yell, "Leroy, where are you?" Suddenly it hit me like a ton of bricks. My friends were pointing at me and laughing hysterically now. Suddenly I realized I was Leroy, as they were now snickering and pointing at me like I was a dummy who didn't realize the joke was on me. All I can remember at that moment was the empty feeling that came over me as I tried to understand not only the look on their faces, but the feeling of confusion that had just come over me. I just remember deciding to go home at that moment, to escape whatever it was that was happening to me. I just had this empty feeling inside which seemed to reach the deepest part of my soul. I didn't realize it at that moment, but I just had my first experience of being demeaned and made to feel inferior because of the color of my skin. Unfortunately, there would be far too many such moments to follow. I finally get back home and tell my family what had just happened, looking for some kind of explanation of what had just taken place. Dad's explanation was short. "Boy, Leroy is a name that some white people call all black people in Alabama." What made this experience more confusing at that time was the fact that we, our family, had just moved to Mobile from Japan, where our family had spent the last 3 years. 3 wonderful years, I might add, living on Tachikawa Air Force Base in Japan. My father was in the Air Force and was stationed there from the time I was 6 until 9. I absolutely loved every minute of growing up in Japan, playing baseball and basketball with my friends, walking to school together every morning, and playing together after school every afternoon, watching our dads play on the same softball team, Gia Squad, in their blue uniforms with gold trim. My dad played third base and was fearless, often playing up close to the batter to field bunts that often turned into hard line drives directly at his head that I still have no idea how he caught. He was daring on the bases as well, until one night he broke his leg sliding into home plate. Me going to baseball tryouts for the first time and catching a fly ball with my nose, but I still made the team. Me on the mound 2 years later, striking out the side in my pitching debut. These are the kinds of wonderful memories I have of my childhood growing up on Tachikawa Air Force Base in Japan. Mobile, Alabama, however, was a different world in 1965. In fact, Alabama was the epicenter of the Civil Rights Movement, and I was growing up right dab in the middle of it, completely unaware of where I was spending my childhood. We were living in a segregated city in the Deep South, and I was experiencing all that segregation had to offer on a daily basis. Going to Ladd Stadium, sitting in the colored section to see my very first AFL pro football game between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets, led by Alabama's favorite son, Joe Willie Namath. I remember riding on the Brooklyn Air Force Base bus with our Cub Scout troop on our way to Pensacola, Florida for a weekend camp out on a Friday afternoon, and passing another bus full of colored high school students. While our buses were side to side, I started to notice that the high school kids were standing up on the bus and were crowding around the windows, pointing, smiling, and clapping. Then I noticed they were looking directly at me. Again, I'm confused, a little but embarrassed, as the Cub Scouts, all of them, my friends, were also looking at me, confirming that the high school kids in the other bus were in fact clapping for me. So for some reason, I just stood up and started waving back to acknowledge them. It lasted for a few minutes until our buses eventually pulled away from each other, but somehow that experience felt good to me. Of course, years later as an adult, I finally realized they were clapping for me that Friday afternoon because I was on a bus with all white kids sitting in the middle of the bus, not the back of the bus in Alabama in 1965. My name isn't Leroy. It's Michael.